CNN spoke with several Ukrainian citizens who fled to Russia following the start of the war. They say Ukrainian government is treating them as criminals for merely running for their lives. One Ukrainian said she is forbidden to go back to her country because she sought refuge in Russia. Here in the U.S., people from certain countries in the Eastern Bloc are being sidelined too. The Boston Marathon was held yesterday and also marked the 10th anniversary of 2013's bombing attack. Runners from Russia and Belarus were barred from participating. Podcaster Sabrina Salvati weighs in. Let's watch.
It has gotten to the point where people who had nothing to do with this war at all are being penalized because of it. The athletes have nothing to do with this war, yet they're being shut out. That happens tomorrow. This is not to tell you not to attend the marathon. If you want to go and have a good time. But while you were there, I want you to remember who can't be there.
Joining us now to discuss is Sabrina Salvati. Welcome, Sabby.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. This is just really gross and illiberal, I think, to deny people because of their national origin on some very convoluted theory that this is like resisting an authoritarianism or something like that. I felt the same way about, orchestras that we're not going to do Russian symphonies anymore. Tchaikovsky, remember that whole thing from a year ago? What is going on here?
It's really unfortunate. I found out about this about 2 weeks ago when I was waiting to see if the Boston Marathon was going to change their policy, but unfortunately they did not. So actually on April 6th, the Boston Marathon actually put this information on their website as a statement about Russia and Belarus. And what that statement said is that athletes that were from the countries of Russia and from Belarus would not be allowed to participate in the Boston Marathon. And for people who are not aware, you have to understand the Boston Marathon is a huge event here. It's a big deal. People come from all over the world to participate and to watch the event. And even to qualify for the event, it's very difficult to qualify. You either have to meet one of two requirements. You either have to meet that qualifying time for your age group and your gender, or you have to join one of the official charities that the Boston Marathon recommends and raise a minimum of $5,000. So it's not easy to qualify. And then on top of that, these runners start training a year prior to the event to be ready for the Boston Marathon. So I was actually surprised that Boston did this of all places, considering what happened here a couple years ago with the Boston Marathon bombing. You would think they would want to bring people together, not divide people. So I think it's very unfortunate. So that message was posted on their website at April 6th, and the marathon was April 17th. It was just this Monday. So it's very sad.
And what if they barred Muslim people from participating because of the bombing? We would all, I think most of us would recognize how wrong that would be. Yeah, it's a really odd posture of things, Sabby. I want to ask you about this other part of the story where, CNN actually did some good, potentially unexpected coverage here of citizens of Ukraine who have fled to Russia. Part of this story is interesting because it corroborates how many people have chosen to go to Russia, including children. I know there was some dispute around reports about what was happening, whether people were forcibly being kidnapped by Russia, as it were, and were there against their will. In this story, it's a lot of people who have voluntarily, not voluntarily because obviously they left because of the war, but have chosen to go to Russia, some of whom want to stay in Russia, some of whom feel as though if they go back to Ukraine, they will be persecuted as criminals because their choice to flee to Russia will be perceived as some kind of allegiance to Russia that is criminally liable. What did you make of this report?
I was actually surprised that CNN covered this story, but I think maybe this push may have come from the recent articles from Seymour Hersh, who revealed that the U.S. government actually blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. That has received more attention. And I think now they've kind of been pushed to, okay, maybe we have to present both sides in some way, shape or form. So I think there has been pressure on that end. And I think that people have to talk to journalists that are on the ground in Russia. There are some that are in independent media. Fiorella Isabel is there in Russia reporting about these events. Wyatt Reed has been there reporting about these events. And I would like to see networks like CNN and MSNBC, Fox News altogether talk to the reporters that are on the ground in Russia as well, and not just the citizens who are going there. For the longest time, we've only heard one side in reference to this conflict with Russia and Ukraine when it comes to mainstream media for the most part. And I think it's time for people to hear the other side.
Well, speaking of hearing from a different side, Brazil's newly elected president, Lula da Silva, weighed in on the status of the Russia-Ukraine war as he visited China this week. In a sit-down interview with Breakthrough News, he expressed doubt over the United States' ability to broker peace between both countries, saying that the only thing spoken of is war, asking, quote, how can we achieve peace between Russia and Ukraine if no one is talking about it? He urged the global South to come together to end the war and then intended to talk to China's Xi Jinping about helping to carve a path toward peace. So very interesting here, sounding an entirely different note than us in the U.S. or many European nations. We've talked about how nations that are part of the global South have not had the same attitude toward this conflict as the U.S. and our European counterparts. And he's putting it there, very frankly, that he wants peace. Peace is in the best interest of everyone worldwide. But he does not have confidence that the U.S. is actually working toward that goal, given the statements coming out of the Biden administration. What did you make of that?
Well, I think countries like Brazil don't seem to be as invested in the military-industrial complex the way the United States government is. I think that's part of it. So there's no profit with peace, but there is profit with war. I think that when you look at the EU, this is an ally to the United States government. They do usually follow the U.S. lead. And I think that Lula working with China, I think this is a big signal to the United States government. People need to pay attention to this because there are other countries out there that do want peace in reference to this conflict. China has become economically a powerhouse. People have to understand that when you look at the top 10 banks in the world, China has 4 out of the top 5. Number 6 is the first American bank, and that's JP Morgan, and they're having financial difficulties as we speak as well. So you have to understand that even when it comes to this conflict with Russia and Ukraine, for the United States government, it's not just about territory. It's also about economic power. If you look back at the Wolfowitz Doctrine of the 1990s, this doctrine basically says that no other country is allowed to become a rival competitor to the United States. That's why the U.S. government is so heavily focused on the China Red Scare or this Russia phobia. These countries economically are pretty powerful. But what has this war gotten us? Economically, it's a mess. It's a disaster. The sanctions that were put on Russia are actually harming other countries, which are allies to the U.S., more than it's harming Russia. Look at the UK. People in the UK can't afford to pay for heat. They had to go to facilities in the UK called warm banks just to get heat. Germany is experiencing an energy crisis. Then if you look at a country like North Korea, which is not a U.S. ally, so to speak, they are going through a food shortage because they depend on that fertilizer from Russia to grow their own crops. So economically, this war is affecting people that they didn't really think it would affect instead of affecting Russia. And Russia seems to be beating the sanctions at this point. But we have to call for some sort of peace, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, good point. It's also worth noting Lula's own politics influencing his posture here on this. As someone from the Workers' Party, a social democrat style of party, I think that kind of left lens is really impacting his view on global politics here. Thank you so much for joining us, Sabby.
Thank you.